We are called to gather and worship as a beloved community. We are called to set aside distractions and anxieties that we might touch deeper springs and be renewed. We are called to seek and to share comfort for the hurts that afflict. We are called to desire more love, more justice, and life more abundant. We are called to truth, to mercy, to humility, and to courage. Let us answer the call with the yes of our lives. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join me in singing our opening hymn, Here We Have Gathered. It's number 360. If you're following along in the hymnal, I'll just a note that on the third verse, in order to make it more inclusive of people who don't identify along the gender binary, instead of we of all ages, women, children, men, it's we of all ages, siblings, partners, friends. If you don't think you can remember that, the words will be on the screen.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, siblings, partners, friends, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. His kindness can heal us, as we give we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
And I invite you to remain risen as we light our chalice and then say our covenant words together.
These words are by the Reverend Deborah Falk. A chancel lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance. A faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all her people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each of us. Please join me in saying our covenant in English and in Spanish. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, thus do we covenant. La doctrina de esta iglesia es el amor, la búsqueda de la verdad es su sacramento, y el servicio es su oración, vivir juntos en paz, buscar el conocimiento en libertad, servir a la humanidad en comunión. Este es nuestro pacto. Sorry. Good morning. Welcome to Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Linda Fitzgerald. The pronouns I use are she and her, and I'm honored to serve as your worship associate this morning. Before we continue, I'd like to thank you for silencing your phones and for observing our mask policy. Emerson is an inclusive, liberal, religious community fondly named for the author, minister, and transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson. We have been a bright beacon of liberal justice in the San Fernando Valley for over 65 years. We acknowledge that we are located on the land of Chumash, Tongva, and Kizh peoples, land which remains part of their lasting identity and heritage. Our existence as a spiritual community can never fully be understood without appreciating the depth of the loss of their land in generations past and the enduring hopes for the renewed vitality of these cultures in years to come. This morning, we explore our options, our ideas about creating paths to justice aside from protesting. I remember marching with members of this congregation and community after the 2016 election, when we had nowhere to go but to the streets to feel the strength and support of those who were also grieving over the election results. Then in that January following the election, we had the first Women's March in Los Angeles, where thousands turned out to show the power and strength of women in this country and our resistance to that election that placed a man in office who was anything but an advocate for women's rights. Across the country, we have seen victims turn grief into activism. By standing with parents and teachers and students in the aftermath of gun violence to appeal for common sense gun laws. We stand on the side of love for LGBTQ and transgender rights, supporting those who are underserved and whose rights are denied by racism and sexism or lack of resources happens through everyday acts of kindness that are meant to enable another or others to feel that they matter. We can drive voters to polls at election time. We can make efforts to support our food insecure neighbors by volunteering at pantries. All of the things we do to support those in need enable them to exercise their rights and is a way of bringing about social change and creating more justice in the world. In the words of Robert Kennedy, praising small acts on behalf of justice, each time a person stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope. Thank you for joining us in worship this morning. Whether this is your first time or your 100th time, whether in person or via Zoom, you are welcome here. If you are new, please sign your guest book in the foyer, and please join us after the service in the pavilion for coffee and conversation. If you'd like to make an entry in our Book of Life, regarding a joy or concern or memory, please find the book on the table, on our candle table under our memorial wall near Kevin. There is a virtual book of life for those of you joining us via Zoom, for you to record your joys or concerns that you would like read here in the service. In the spirit of fellowship, let us take time to greet each other.
Hey, how you doing? That's good. I'm doing good. Oh, that's wonderful. I should do that next month on the anniversary of my dad's passing.
Yeah. As it turns out, Friday,
Oh, wow. Oh, I'm so sorry. Kind of get it all over in 1 week.
Well, my challenge that I faced is everybody likes to know that it's in their back. I usually have a son
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to straighten it all out.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Mhm. That's right. You know, I've been caregiving my mom, so I've been splitting my time between LA and Salt Lake City. Well, it's Roy, Utah, it's 30 miles north or something. So my mom lives in, actually this is Roy, about 30 miles north of Salt Lake. So I've been splitting my time between LA and Roy because my mom fell this past she's 92 years old.
Oh my God.
With severe osteoporosis. So when she fell this past summer, she broke her pelvis, her 3 ribs, her neck. So she's had a terrible time recovering. But although she's doing great right now. She's doing really good. But for months, she was really in a world of hurt. I'm the only child. So a cousin of mine helped out. So we were able to, for a while she couldn't do anything. But I had to take over the finances and everything. So I kind of know what you're saying. At least I'm able to straighten out while she's alive. I've thought about that. I thought, this is really... She's doing so much better. So much better. I can't. She's not quite the way she was before the accident. But she's so much better.
It is good to be together this morning. So our story for all ages this morning is called Pies from Nowhere: How Georgia Gilmore Sustained the Montgomery Bus Boycott. Some of you might remember this story. I told it in a sermon a few years ago. But it's a delightful one regardless, and this time it has pictures. Georgia Gilmore grew up on a farm in Alabama where she fed pigs and milked the cows. Georgia did her best to listen to what her mother taught her. Think twice before doing anything you might regret, and never hate anyone. Georgia grew up and soon had a family of her own. She did plenty of cooking along the way, and when it was time for something sweet, she'd blend butter and sugar in a bowl and get her homemade pound cake started, and then add tea bags to a pot of water for a new batch of sweet tea. Georgia was a cook at the National Lunch Company in downtown Montgomery, Alabama. Because of segregation laws, the restaurant counter was separated into two sections, one side for white customers and one side for black customers. Georgia knew it was wrong, but that was the way things had always been. On December 1st, 1955, Georgia was working at the restaurant when a news alert came over the radio. A black woman named Rosa Parks had been arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus to a white passenger, as the law demanded. Already a civil rights activist, Rosa was tired of giving in to rules that were unjust, and she wasn't the only one. The next day, a flyer was passed around the black community in Montgomery, asking people to boycott the buses. Georgia watched as buses drove down the street, one after another, empty, empty, empty. Because she'd been treated poorly by the white drivers, Georgia hadn't ridden the buses for 2 months. Still, she wanted to be a part of the movement. Not long after, she went to Holt Street Baptist Church to hear Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speak. The church was full and speakers had been set up so the people outside could hear. Dr. King spoke about freedom, unity, equality. We are determined here in Montgomery to work and fight until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Those were things Georgia believed in, and she was willing to fight for them. So Georgia decided to help in the best way she knew how. She worked with a group of women in her community, and together they purchased supplies, bread, lettuce, and chickens, and then they went off to cook. The women brought food to the meetings that followed at the church. They sold sandwiches and dinners. As the bus boycotters walked and walked, Georgia cooked and cooked. And boy, did the people of Montgomery love her food. Georgia's group donated the profits from their sales to help fund the boycott. But if anyone found out about these women, or if anyone had found out these women were involved, they could have lost their jobs or even been evicted. So Georgia ran the operation, and the other women acted as secret helpers. See, the way I figured it, people always had to eat. So I made the pies, said Georgia. The women sold baked goods to stores, laundromats, and beauty shops, and people paid in cash so they wouldn't be connected to aiding the boycott. Sweet potato pie, peach pie, red velvet cake, 7-Up cake. Only Georgia knew who baked them, and only Georgia knew who bought them. Every Monday and Thursday, Georgia would go to the boycott strategy meeting at the church, and she'd walk up to the collection plate and announce how much her group was contributing. It was usually the most of the day. There was cheering, clapping, foot stomping. But whenever people asked where the money came from, she'd kept it a secret. It came from nowhere, she'd say. So her brave group of bakers became known as the Club from Nowhere. The club not only raised enough to purchase gas for the carpool system that had been set up for the boycott, but they were also able to buy station wagons to help get people where they needed to go. Now, Georgia was called to speak in court about a time when a bus driver had mistreated her. After she had paid, the driver demanded she get off and enter through the back of the bus, as black riders were often forced to do at that time. When I reached the back door and was about to get on, he shut the back door and pulled off, and I didn't even ride the bus after paying my fare. So I decided right then and there I wasn't going to ride the buses anymore, Georgia testified. Georgia knew she was doing the right thing by standing up for her fellow protesters, but the news of the trial spread, and when the National Lunch Company found out that she was part of the boycott, she was fired from her job. Georgia was raising 6 children on her own, and she needed to find a new way to support her family. Dr. King encouraged her to start her own business. All these years you've worked for somebody else. Now it's time you worked for yourself, he said. He helped her improve the kitchen in her home, and Georgia got new pots and pans and cooking supplies. Word soon got around, and people came to eat at Georgia's. When they came to her house for a meal, they would eat wherever they could find a seat. And if they couldn't find a seat, they'd eat standing up. Georgia loved to talk and joke with her customers, and soon enough there were long lines to get a meal cooked by her. People ordered meals for delivery too. Georgia was making hundreds of lunches each day. She packed up fried chicken, black-eyed peas with okra, fresh corn muffins, and apple pie, and sent her kids out to deliver them. If you were lucky, you might even get her homemade macaroni and cheese. Dr. King frequently had meals at Georgia's house, and because she was a big woman with a big personality, he lovingly called her Tiny. And because civil rights leaders knew they could trust Georgia, her home became a place for important and often secret meetings. I just served him and let him talk, she'd say. On October 13th, 1956, Georgia was cooking in her kitchen, listening to music on the radio, when the station interrupted the song to deliver news on the radio. The Supreme Court had declared that segregation on buses was illegal. The boycotters had won. Georgia was thrilled. People could ride the bus and sit anywhere they desired. At the next church meeting, Georgia sat in her seat and listened as Dr. King announced that the Montgomery bus boycott was a success. We didn't have to walk no more, said Georgia. Still, there would be more battles to fight. So Georgia Gilmore kept right on cooking. Obviously, this past Monday, we celebrated the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And so often, though, the focus is just on Dr. King, and we forget about all of the people who played parts big and small, remembered, and those lost to the history books who made a difference. And our service this morning is about those people who are lost to the history books, those who don't get the recognition for the work they do, people who show up in many different ways to work for justice. I now invite you to join me in saying our Unitarian Universalist affirmation. You can do the hand signals with me if you'd like. We are Unitarian universalists, a people of open minds, loving hearts, and welcoming hands.
The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather there to grow more generous in spirit and in action. January, our Share the Plate recipient is the Mission of Communities for a Better Environment, CBE. It is to build people's power in California communities of color and low income, communities to achieve environmental health and justice by preventing and reducing pollution and building green, healthy, and sustainable communities and environments. CBE provides residents in heavily polluted urban communities with organizing skill, leadership training, and legal, scientific, and technical assistance so that they can successfully confront threats to their health and well-being. CBE's vision embraces local transformation, but the CBE vision goes far beyond local as humanity now faces environmental crisis of global proportions. Donations can be made using the Breeze app or at donate.emersonuuc.org. Please make checks payable to Emerson UU Church and write Share the Plate in the memo. If you would like to make payment on a pledge, please write pledge instead. The offering will be gratefully received.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
Each week, we take time in our service to lift up those joys and sorrows within our community and in the wider world. This week in our book of life, Kristen Sony writes, "My best friend Marcella flies to Mexico today to be with her father, who is ill and in hospital. Her family is trying to get him here, home as soon as possible, that they can all be reunited soon, and for his peace and recovery." Andrea Reuter writes that her mom was briefly in the hospital last week for chest pain, but she is fine, not a heart attack or stroke. She will be 90 this year and is doing well. And in our virtual book of life, I guess I have to read this, but it says, joy is that it's always a joy when Reverend Matthew is in the pulpit. And that's from Nicole. And it is a joy to be back in the pulpit, not having been here in 3 weeks. I was obviously planning on being with you last Sunday and then was sick. So I'm glad to be here and sharing this space with you this morning. And our thoughts also go out to all of the places, all of the people who are living with violence in so many places around the world. From Pakistan to Iran to Yemen, Ukraine, and Gaza. May we hope for peace and healing and comfort. In a moment, I'll sound this singing bowl, and as I do, I invite you to speak into this space any names or occasions, any joys or sorrows that are on your heart this morning, and that you would like lifted up into this community in this, our embracing meditation. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can type that in the chat. All that has been shared and all that we hold in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, we offer these into the embrace of this beloved community. I invite you, if you haven't already, to deepen into a space of meditation or prayer. Just ground yourself here in this moment, feeling the support of the chair, of the earth underneath you. Maybe that means closing your eyes or softening your gaze. Just noticing your breathing. I offer these words from Liz Weber. Spirit of life, help us to be present with all that is our life, both our deepest sorrows and our greatest joys, so that we can truly live, engaging fully in our own life and in our community. Spirit of community, help us to know how linked we are, how each one of our cares touches us all. Help us to ask for support when we are in need and offer our support to others when we are able, so that we may rest in the solace of one another's love. Spirit of love, help us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, so that we might fully embody love and resist hatred. Spirit of resistance, help us to stick up for what is right, even when we are afraid or tired. Help us to dream of the world as it should be and act to bring that world about. Help us to find hope each day. Spirit of hope, help us through this day and each day. Help us to be present for all that is our life. For all this we pray. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be. I now invite you to join in singing "Faith is a Forest." This tune is it's a Chinese folk song. And so for those of us who are accustomed to Western ears, it may be a little irregular in terms of the melody. But our choir is going to help us in singing the song. So you may find it easier if you follow along in the hymnal, or if you feel called, you can just listen.
Because it's unfamiliar, I'll play the whole thing through as an intro. Faith is a forest in which doubts play and hide. Insight can hear the still small voice deep inside. Web of life, may this thread I weave. Strength and commitment to all I believe. Wisdom to be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say. Seeds of both meek and strong are scattered in air. Dignity shines undimmed by bigotry's glare. Web of life, may this thread I weave. Help me bear witness to all I believe. Justice be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say. Fortune and famine ride the swift winds of change. Sorrow and pleasure seem united in dance. Web of life, may this thread I weave mingle compassion with all I believe. Mercy be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say.
The story of Georgia Gilmore and her club from nowhere is a different story than we're used to hearing. When we tell the stories of the civil rights movement or of the many movements for justice, we often hear about a few leaders: Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Gandhi, Susan B. Anthony, Gloria Steinem, Harvey Milk, Marsha P. Johnson, Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, Greta Thunberg. Now, as leadership in justice movements has become more diffuse, I think particularly over the last few decades, these days few activists reach that level of recognition as, say, Greta Thunberg has. But we still focus, the media still focuses on the big actions, the protests, the marches. And I know that's often what I'm drawn to because those actions can make a difference. They can show where the public is, can help shift public opinion. We almost never hear about the people working behind the scenes. Georgia Gilmore cooking food to raise money for the Montgomery bus boycott. Not to mention all of the unnamed women of the club from nowhere who cooked and baked and don't even receive the recognition that Georgia gets. Maybe the reason I love the story is how ordinary it seems. Something as simple and as common as cooking food. They may not have taken the same risks as those who were out there in the streets, and yet they were key players in supporting the boycott and the civil rights movement more broadly. Or maybe I love the story because I know people whose contribution to movements I've been part of has just been to make giant pots of soup, bowls of salad, and trays of cornbread, who scrounge for 2-day-old pastries and bread and could always be counted on to show up and feed people whenever there was an action or a training or a protest camp. They don't seek the limelight and don't get the glory, but without them, the movement wouldn't be as strong, might not even be able to exist. And there are so many different ways to show up for justice. And some of them are in support roles for protests and other forms of direct action. The artists who paint banners and signs that greatly enhance a protest. For example, I love the way the sunflowers have become connected with climate justice. As a symbol, it evokes beauty and hope. And it also is connected to the fact that sunflowers are also planted to help clean up contaminated soil. Or this giant orca whale puppet that numerous people helped craft, seen here taking part in a procession of the animals organized by UU Ministry for Earth. And when you see a 15-foot whale coming down the street, it grabs your attention and imagination in a way that a sign just can't. And sometimes it isn't even connected to a protest at all, even if it expresses similar values, like those who paint murals, which beautify our neighborhoods and also serve as daily reminders of the justice we seek for our communities, who call us to that vision of a better world, Or the people who bought the house across the street from the Westboro Baptist Church. If you don't know who they are, congratulations. But basically, they are a bigoted hate group. And some folks bought the house right across the street and painted it with rainbow colors. It's called the Equality House. And then a few years later, bought the house next to that and painted it with the colors of the trans pride flag. And art can also help us perceive things from a different perspective. Plays, movies, television, books, poetry. Storytellers whose imagination offers us new ways of thinking about the world, of new, beautiful possibilities. And the music makers who inspire us when we feel down or disheartened. When music, in the face of repression, can be a source of courage and strength and resilience. Or the people who don't protest, but take the more traditional political routes, showing up at neighborhood council meetings, writing letters to the editor or to their elected representative, or even meeting with their representatives, who do the non-flashy work of registering people to vote, or writing letters to potential voters to encourage them to vote, or driving folks to the polls on election day. The people who volunteer at soup kitchens or the food pantry every week, who negotiate labor contracts, who sit on nonprofit boards. And I could go on, but laundry lists are not very compelling. Suffice it to say that there are countless ways to show up for justice, to make a difference in our community, to take an action to build the more just world we dream of. And sometimes that might also be in the way we try to live out our values in our interactions with other people, which I want to explore in the second part of our sermon. But first, let's have a reading. Beatitudes for Justice Builders, which I'll ask Linda to help me with.
These words are by Lindy Ramsden. Blessed are you who can question your own assumptions and listen with an open mind.
You will receive new insights beyond your imagining.
Blessed are you who suffer the attacks of others to stand up for what is right.
You will not be alone, for your courage will inspire others to rise.
Blessed are you who build friendships as well as justice.
Even when you lose an issue, you will have strengthened the foundation of your community.
Blessed are you who take delight in people.
You will not be bored in meetings.
Blessed are you who agitate the placid waters of complacency.
You will create waves in the inertia of privilege and will know the thrill of riding the surf of change.
Blessed are you who lead with enthusiasm and confidence, resisting the temptation to shame the apathetic or self-absorbed.
You will inspire curiosity and hope in others.
Blessed are you who play as well as work.
You will have more fun, build more energy, and will draw the powers of the impish to your cause.
Blessed are you who ask for help in your role as leaders.
You will find teachers at every turn, and your work will remain interesting and alive.
Blessed are you who do not demonize your opponents.
Your eyes and your hearts will be open.
Where am I? Blessed are you who sing and dance.
You will find energy and joy to lift you on your journey.
Blessed are you who offer thanks and praise fivefold for every critique.
Your children will want to visit after they are grown. People will want to serve on your committees, and friends will be interested in your opinions.
Blessed are you who study the rhythms of history.
You will have knowledge with which to shape the future.
Blessed are you who work in coalition rather than principled isolation.
You will meet great people, learn things that you didn't realize you needed to know, and have partners for the journey when you are in the lead or in need.
Blessed are you who volunteer to be secretary and take good minutes.
Your words will become history, and your efforts will move steadily forward rather than running absent-mindedly over thoroughly discussed ground.
Blessed are you who discover, train, and encourage young leaders.
You will see your work expand and grow beyond your own time and talent.
Blessed are you who can change your mind.
You are still alive.
Blessed are you who will not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
You will see progress in your lifetime.
Blessed are you with an active spiritual life.
You will find perspective and comfort in times of loss and betrayal, and will rise without cynicism to meet the challenges of a new day.
Blessed are you who live from a place of gratitude.
For you will know the meaning of life. And now our choir will sing our anthem this morning, Like a Mighty Stream.
Like a mighty stream.
For over 3 decades, my dad worked for Northrop Grumman, the 4th largest defense contractor in the world, which is a euphemistic way of saying it builds things designed to kill people. Now, as someone who mostly opposes war and killing of any sort, it was an incongruous fit for my dad, though the kind of work he did wasn't directly related to designing or building weapons of war. He worked in information systems, developing database systems to track and manage employees' human resources records. But working for Northrop was still something that he grappled with. He applied to other jobs that would have been a better ethical fit, like the California State University system, but it never worked out. And he ended up retiring from Northrop. Even though his employer's industry didn't represent his values, though, he brought his values to work, particularly in the interpersonal relationship with coworkers. He wouldn't tolerate sexist comments and sought to be an ally to people of color and LGBTQ people in a workplace where some people were more regressive. On more than one occasion, he was the first person in the office that a colleague came out to at a time when being open about one's sexuality could be career limiting. When his fellow software developers expressed concern or confusion about the need for and nature of gathering data on employees' racial, ethnic, or gender identity, he would patiently educate them on the need to have such data to root out intentional or unintentional discrimination. Being a Unitarian Universalist informed how he lived his life. And in the last decade, as the culture shifted and many corporations recognized the financial value of having a diverse workforce who could bring their whole identity to the workplace, which was a sort of top-down and bottom-up transition at the same time, and my dad always made it clear that his Unitarian Universalist values informed his support for that change. Now, I know most people don't have jobs like mine where living out your Unitarian Universalist values is literally part of the job. But all of us have the opportunity to live out our values in the interactions we have with others, whether that's part of our job or with people we meet out in the world. I think of teachers who create supportive spaces for youth of color or LGBTQ youth, who might be the first adult a student shares their new pronouns with. A teacher who makes it clear that their classroom is a welcoming space that has no place for bigotry. Or the librarian who puts out children's books that reflect the diversity of the human experience and treat the unhoused people who might come in to use the computers with dignity and respect. Creating that sort of welcoming, supportive environment can be a true blessing. When I got my hair cut a couple weeks ago, I had to find a new hairstylist after mine had moved away, and I went to this barbershop called the Men's Parlor, spelled the British way with U, parlour. So you know it's got to be chic for the discerning gentleman. And as I walked in, I noticed the artwork on the wall. Several illustrations of pinup girls caressing those spinning barbershop poles, and movie posters for Pulp Fiction and American Psycho. And I like both of those movies, really like Pulp Fiction. But when you choose to put those specific posters up, you are communicating something. This is a barbershop for men's men, where you talk about last night's Raiders game, and someone might say something casually sexist and no one bats an eye. And credit where credit's due, they gave me a good haircut. but as a queer person who often passes for straight. At that moment, I was really appreciating the importance of hairstylists who specifically cater to queer and trans people, who go out of their way to make their customers feel more comfortable, create a space that is welcome and warm, where you don't have to worry that someone is going to misgender you. Or similarly, the role that black barbershops and beauty salons play in their community. To have a doctor or a therapist who's going to understand where you're coming from, where you can bring your marginalized identity and not worry that your lived experience is going to be questioned. Are you sure that's what she meant? Maybe you're just too sensitive. And it might be in our interactions with people out in the world that we live our values. The way we treat restaurant servers or cashiers at the checkout. Treating disabled people with dignity and respect, recognizing that they are whole human beings with rich inner lives, not just someone worthy of pity. And since the 2016 election, people have felt increasingly emboldened to express their racist thoughts, their homophobia and transphobia, their anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and their anti-immigrant sentiments. Things which they might otherwise have kept to themselves because it wasn't socially acceptable to say. And so it is into this world that we must live our values of justice, equity, compassion, honoring the beautiful diversity of the tapestry of the rich tapestry of our communities, our country, our world. As the Talmud says, do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. And because the work of justice can't be finished in our lifetimes, I think that frees us up to look clearly and see what role we wish to play in bringing about that change, because they all are needed. Before we get to our closing hymn, a couple of announcements. Well, first, a gratitude. Thanks to Linda Fitzgerald, our worship associate. Thanks to Kevin Matthey and Eloise Porter and our choir who made such beautiful music this morning. Thanks to our tech associates, making sure the sound works and the people on Zoom can join in, to the folks at the welcome desk, to those who helped set up for coffee hour, and those who have yet to help out with cleanup. All of that work, we are grateful for. Also, after our service is our environmental justice ministry here in the sanctuary, which is going to be at noon. And speaking of people who help us see things in different ways, shift our perspectives, one of the many ways we bring more justice into the world, we have this Friday the latest in our Sacred Cinema film series. And this Friday, and the service will be inspired by the film. The service next Sunday will be inspired by the film. This Friday, our film is I'm Not Your Negro, which is the documentary, Academy Award nominated documentary about James Baldwin and based on his writings. And so I'll show you a clip now. Whoops, that didn't work. Can you click on it up there? Because something's wrong with my clicker. There we go.
If any white man in the world says, give me liberty or give me death, the entire white world applauds. When a black man says exactly the same thing, he is judged a criminal and treated like one, and everything possible is done to make an example of this bad nigger so there won't be any more like him.
The story of the Negro in America is the story of America. It is not a pretty story.
Most of the white Americans I've ever encountered, sure, they have nothing whatever against Negroes. That's really not the question. Really encountered apathy and ignorance. You don't know what's happening on the other side of the wall because you don't want to know.
In America, I was free only in battle, never free to rest.
We need to take action, any kind of action, by any means necessary.
They needed us to pick the cotton, and now they don't need us anymore. Now they don't need us, they're going to kill us all off. There are days when you wonder what your role is in this country and what your future is in it. I can't be a pessimist because I'm alive. The question you've got to ask yourself, the white population of this country's got to ask itself, is why it was necessary to have a nigger in the first place. Because I'm not a nigger, I'm a man. But if you think I'm a nigger, it means you need it. And you gotta find out why. And the future of the country depends on that.
So if you haven't seen it before, in some ways, it definitely is a heavy movie, but it's also an incredibly entertaining one. And so I hope to see you there on Friday. I believe it's also streaming on Netflix. And now I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, Building a New Way. It's number 1017 in the Teal hymnals.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love that is a seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, the world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
I invite you, as our service comes to a close, to, if you feel comfortable, to join hands or to bump elbows or touch a shoulder, make some connection. To those of you joining us online, we send our energy out to you. We invite you to send it to each other and back to us. as we prepare to depart, we give voice to these hopes. May we know ourselves bound in community, even while we are apart. May a passion for justice burn in our lives. May we carry the light of compassion in our hearts and in our every interaction. May we be whole in our devotion to truth and always carry the lamp of peace before us. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
Amen.